imagine it is like he was working a lot with Canadian and complexity and adding more and more ideas, details, perspectives to it. And he still needed some type of so what type of answer, in a sense. All right, that's a lot of knowledge. So what? How do we actually turn that into something that people can use?
Hmm.
And very often in organizations, like the higher you go in the hierarchy structure, the more and more you work with strategy. So the strategy is the best place to work for many reasons, money included. Uh, and the way I think about it is like, all right, how do we turn this whole body of knowledge into something useful for strategy? And then enter Estuarina. You probably you can tell me how's it
Oh,
pronounced.
it's a really unusual word. I mean, I'm coming at this from a completely page one in the book, but an estuary is like a branch of a river,
Yeah.
is or the mouth of a river, right? Is the estuary. So I was in a place last weekend where there's actually a real life confluence, and a confluence is a thing in the real world as well. There you go. I was at a confluence. I was like, oh, I feel like such a nerd. I didn't know there were confluences. But an estuary, so an estuary is where the river meets the sea, right? Where the river flows into the sea.
Yeah, and you can probably talk more about the metaphor. I see the metaphor as like the water flows in both levels, or in both ways.
Hmm.
Sometimes it goes in one direction, sometimes it overflows in the other direction, and probably that's where he got the metaphor from. And it's a very nice the whole workshop is a very nice idea about how to work with a strategy in a complex system. And a lot of people claim they are in complex system. I don't know if all of them are. Probably everyone is for some time in some period of their life in a complex system, but that's a separate subject. And there are like few things I remember. Um, One is how do you work with sense of direction? I think Dave Snowden talks a lot about vector of change. So it's more like rather than abstract goals, you have sense of direction, vector of change, some direction in which you're going. And then how do you manage your energy or manage the cost of influencing some change in the organization? That's another aspect of the Estuarian
I,
mapping.
I'm going to say estuarine.
Estuarine,
Estuarine. Yeah.
estuarine
That's the
mapping,
first time I've actually said it out loud. I've read the word a few times, but yeah,
estuarine mapping,
estuarine mapping. Yeah.
estuarine mapping.
Just like Carnarvon, you have to explain it every time you say it.
I already forgot estuarine.
Estuarine, yeah, yeah.
uh, and then there was the aspect of what he calls micro nudges. So you do the estuarine mapping,
Hmm.
and out of it you move into micro projects of what are the things that you can do to again to influence the situation.
Hmm.
And the workshop itself is like, again, we should probably add somewhere here the picture, because picture says more than 1,000 words. You have the hexes that Dave Snowden loves a lot, and the hexes in this case are all the different wasn't it constructors. It's a lot of interesting language that one needs to learn.
Hmm.
Actually, since this is a random talk about the workshop, I can tell that another random thing is that the super tricky aspect of running it is that there's so much new lingo,
Hmm.
and doing it like explaining all the new language first and then doing stuff, that takes a lot of time. And that's my like feedback to people who will never listen to it because they don't watch this video, is that ah you know I understand that when you go to an organization to do a 2-3 day workshop on strategy, then you have a lot of time to introduce new concepts, do the workshop, and so on and so on. But when you are working inside the organization, you will probably not ever get 2-3 days of uh, higher level of management to work only on one idea. And then how do you actually do it without maybe going too deep into constraints theory, constructors, all the crazy stuff that they have there. But then in the workshop, you map the constraints and constructors on the energy and time scale, and you try to figure out what are the different aspects of the picture that you build. What are the things that you probably can't change? What are the things that are changing so quickly that you should stabilize them? What are the things that potentially you can change? Or maybe this liminal zone of, yeah, maybe we can't, but maybe there are some people who can, or yeah, it's just unclear. I was talking a lot about liminality this weekend because of a colleague who is going through divorce period, and it's like it's a good example of a liminal period. You're not sure, will you end up divorced or will you end up together? I don't know if you know the liminal space, what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the liminal space for me is it done, right? It's like, yeah, it's done. I just need to finish the tests and the documentation and hand over to the support guys, and then they'll take it into a period of hypercare with the customer. Like, okay, so it's not done. I mean, it's marked as done. Oh yeah, no, it's nearly done. It's almost there. You know, that liminal, depending on your perspective, right? Something's done or not. I think a lot of what you said resonated with me because I've done things that require a lot of jargon to explain or a lot of new language in workshops. One example is value stream identification, value stream mapping, and yeah, it's yeah, it's tough because you kind of you're relying on the participants to be engaged, I guess, before you introduce these ideas, right? Because if if you're trying to generate engagement in the ideas at the same time as introducing the ideas, that's a difficult enough job,
Yeah,
especially with the Dave Snowden language, which it is great, and the theories are brilliant, but um, and I still think Evan is really influential, and it's a foundational element for a lot of things in our kind of work, but it's quite intellectual. It's quite it's for people who are interested in tangible actions, like what are we actually doing here? It's a hard sell. I'm not saying that's right, but I'm just saying it's a reality of doing this in an organization. Now that said, I'm taking Cynefin and I'm using it in a foundational day one, like introduction to like why do we talk about agile ways of working um pretty soon. Like I think it is possible to do this stuff gently. Like maybe you don't need to do full estuarine mapping, but I like the idea of the energy and what was it, time and energy
time
and the
and
different
energy. Yeah,
the different strategies of appropriate to different elements of what's
Yeah.
going on. That's really interesting.
For me, there is a brilliant metaphor being used of constraints. And I'll try to put a picture again somewhere here that I saw somewhere online who someone was explaining what the constraints are. And it's very cool because I usually think in terms of boundaries, like what are the boundaries? But the boundary is more like, this is the boundary, you can't cross it. And constraints, you can think of them in many different ways. Like, for example, the structure of the leaf is like the skeleton is a constraint. So it's not a boundary. It's more like it's a constraint how other things will be structured in your body, not
Mm.
necessarily limiting it. More like exoskeleton would be. This is the boundary. You can't go beyond that. And
Yes.
I like this metaphor of constraints, and I try
Mm.
to talk more about what are the constraints now. Yeah,
Yeah, there's that idea of enabling constraints, like that
yeah,
if everything is completely free, then it's very difficult to make a decision. It's very difficult to take a step forward. But if we say, okay, look, this is the landscape, we're going to put a few guidelines in place for what we're talking about. Those are enabling constraints, right? Because it helps you focus. It helps you zoom in and decide what's appropriate. I was thinking about the confluence again, and perhaps another metaphor. I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, but the Nemunas River in Kaunas in Lithuania, it's very fast flowing. So if you want to swim in the river, if you swim in one direction, it's going to be really, really difficult. But if you swim in the other direction, you'll be carried along by the tide, by the current, and you'll cover a great distance, really, really fast. And maybe it's those kind of metaphors that Snowden's bringing into estuarine mapping. Is it like that? You know, sometimes you don't need to invest a lot of energy to make a lot of progress if you're looking at the right thing. Whereas other times you can, to use a different metaphor, bang your head against the wall, like invest a lot of energy and
yeah.
make very little progress.
And sometimes it's for me in recent weeks, even this idea of movement of this energy and time scale. For example, we had the some subject related to how fast it is to start new ideas and start working on new ideas without
Mm.
finishing the old ones.
Mhm.
And this Estuarine mapping, I already forgot how you pronounce it. Uh, it's like, all right, maybe we should introduce some constraint that will make it more difficult to start new ideas
Mm.
because maybe it's just too easy in some context to start them. And it's it changes a bit the way of thinking about it. Uh, that was something like as a new idea how to handle some subjects. How can we make it easier for people to do something? How can we make it more difficult for them to do something and move things on this map that is being created? Is it a map or is it a graph? It's a map. I was thinking about the other Wordley mapping. Simon Wardley starts by explaining what is the map, what is the graph, what's the difference, and why he's doing the mapping, not the graphing. Then this would be a map, I imagine, because there's a two fixed axis.
I'm back thinking about there's an exercise that you can do at the start of a workshop, and it's you ask people to choose which metaphor, which description of a participant describes them the best. So you can be oh, let me see if I remember the four of them. So the worst one is prisoner. I'm here against my will. I have no desire to be here, but I have to be here. That's prisoner. Explorer is I'm here to learn and to contribute, and I'll do my best to get the positive that I can out of it. Then shopper is like maybe I'll pick up one or two things here, but I'm not massively committed. And then I think visitor is I'm just here. I'm just here. I'm happy to be here. And you can like that map the room, put a dot on the one that describes you the best, or verbally do it. There's a few different ways to do it. And it's fun because sometimes you can go into a room and think, oh my God, estuarine mapping, who's interested in this? And then you see on the map, like, oh, wow, it feels like a lot of people are curious.
Yeah.
Great, and it can kind of give a bit of energy as well. But it made me think that in this conversation, I'm probably I'm probably a bit of a shopper. I'm probably just trying to pick, from estuarine mapping, like what might I be able to, what elements or pieces of language could I take and just gently start using in different things rather than using the whole thing.
You know what I thought about many, many years ago when I was walking around the organization talking about how we work in Scrum, more in the context of people need something from the team, and I was explaining that we are doing this fun new thing called Scrum, without going deep into Scrum, but it's like yeah, and uh, you can probably talk about this to a Scrum Master. Oh, Scrum Master? Who is that? Ah, you explain briefly. Ah, so like a project manager. No, no, not really.
Like
But
an
then it's like,
agile project manager.
and then it's like, all right, can you actually do can you do the shopping in a sense? Do you need to explain the whole package, or can you
Hmm.
just pick one idea and that's enough? I don't know. I don't know.
You see that I think that's another that's a great articulation of how, you know, y- it's maybe not our role to be to be the teacher in this case. It's like you say, just to shine a light on something that could be useful. Assume people have the resources they need to learn more if they're curious, and just kind of get into the bits that can be helpful. And that's I think that's a depending on the room you're going into. Like I remember value stream mapping workshops, and it was like it was pretty brutal. Like you'd have to get through the terminology quickly, but you'd be pulled back into it. It's like, are we talking about, there's two types of value stream? Like, which one are we talking about? So it's yeah, choose the things that I think are most helpful right away. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like engaging people's curiosity is probably a better way to introduce it, especially if you're interested in it. I think if you're interested in something like this, it genuinely comes across. Rather than being like, oh, I read a book about Wardley mapping last week. That makes me very clever. There's two different ways to bring it forward. I have yet to find a Wardley mapping practical application. I confess I
All
haven't
right.
tried very hard. Maybe that's a topic for another day.
Maybe let's do that. The other day we are in the progress, never-ending progress probably of doing a wordly mapping for some area,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of learning for me. I
Oh,
was
great.
thinking that no, because this conversation is a bit random in my head, like unprepared. So what do we talk about? Constructors or constraints, or how do we do the workshop reflections? Maybe for the next time we can do something more narrowed down for wordlay mapping, lessons learned, how you do it, or things like
Could
that.
do, yeah.
Maybe
But I
that
think
would
what
be
we've done
useful.
here is we've spoken to the shoppers. So maybe people watching this are going to be a little bit more curious about estuarine mapping now, even just how to pronounce it. Maybe there's a video out there that'll tell us both how to how to say
I
the words.
think it would be awesome if someone came to the comment section and said, "Oh, this is bad because you didn't cover this or that." And I was very interested in this. Like, you didn't explain the most basic thing. Just tell us what
Well,
the most basic thing is, and we will focus on it.
we'll save it. We'll save it for the sequel.